And good evening. We are coming on the air tonight with new details in that deadly shooting in Dallas. A gunman opening fire on an ICE facility in what officials are calling a targeted attack on law enforcement. The FBI director posting this image. Take a look of bullet casings found on the scene. And written on one of them, the words anti-ICE. You see it clearly. The Department of Homeland Security also releasing these photos from inside the building. What you're looking at here are bullet holes piercing a window and a framed American flag. Law enforcement sources tell NBC News it was a 29-year-old shooter that police say fired from a rooftop into a secure area of the facility. One detainee was killed, another two injured before the gunman took his own life. And if this all sounds familiar, the attack coming amid a spike in violence against ICE officers. President Trump blasting Democrats for their rhetoric about ICE agents, blaming them for the attack. The shooting is the latest in a bloody season of political violence in America, 2 weeks to the day that Charlie Kirk was killed by an assassin's bullet in Utah. Last month, a police officer killed after shots rang out at the CDC headquarters in Atlanta. And earlier this summer, an attack on Minnesota lawmakers, leaving a state legislator and her husband dead. Priscilla Thompson tonight is on the scene for us in Dallas and leads us off.
You can hear the gunshots. Denise's Robleto was waiting for her mother at the Dallas ICE field office and started filming. I was with my sister praying, she said.
At least 3 people shot, multiple people shot.
Police say the gunman perched on a rooftop, killed one detainee and wounded 2 others before taking his own life. No ICE officers were injured. DHS calling it an attack on ICE law enforcement. The FBI releasing this image of shell casings found near the shooter, engraved with the words anti-ICE. Tom speaking with the acting ICE director.
There were some brave men and women on the ground that went into those vans, were pulling those detainees out while they're under fire.
And they were all shot while they were in the vehicle?
They were shot while they were in the vehicle, right. So the shooter obviously didn't know who was in the vehicle. He was just randomly shooting at windows into vehicles that he'd already seen down there.
The agency releasing images of bullet holes in a window and American flag inside the facility. Authorities say the gunman fired multiple rounds from the top of that building into this ICE facility a few hundred yards away. Tonight, NBC News has learned the shooter is 29-year-old Joshua John, according to multiple senior law enforcement officials. John's brother described him to NBC News as unique without elaborating, saying he didn't have strong feelings about ICE as far as I knew, and that he was not a marksman, that's for sure. It comes as DHS says there's been a 1,000% increase in violence against ICE officers, including an ambush-style shooting outside an ICE facility in Texas, and a man appearing to open fire at immigration agents during California protests. President Trump tonight blaming Democrats, posting, "I am calling on all Democrats to stop this rhetoric against ICE and America's law enforcement right now."
All the vile talk against ICE, calling us Nazis, Gestapos, that something like this was going to happen, and it did. And, for me, it's my worst nightmare. Never thinking that in our own facility, our own location, we take sniper fire in a major city.
All right, Priscilla Thompson joins us tonight from outside that ICE facility. Priscilla, I know you have some new reporting about the victims tonight and their conditions.
Yeah, Tom, Mexican authorities have confirmed that one of those injured is a Mexican national. The Department of Homeland Security says that both of the people injured are in critical condition tonight, as Secretary Kristi Noem says that she is praying for the victims and their families. Tom?
Priscilla Thompson leading us off. We're going to have much more on my interview with the acting ICE director, Todd Lyons, and the ongoing threats against immigration officials later in this broadcast. We're also following breaking news tonight out of the Justice Department. NBC News has learned from 2 DOJ officials and a person familiar that federal prosecutors are considering whether to indict former FBI Director James Comey. The news coming just days after President Trump pressed his attorney general to go after his political enemies. Joining us now with this new reporting is NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter. Tom, walk us through what you've learned.
Right. So a couple of different things here. First off, I think it's important for people to understand that there's a bit of a clock that's in play here, because one of the things we're told that federal prosecutors are considering in bringing these charges is an exchange that former FBI Director James Comey had with Senator Ted Cruz before Congress in 2020, specifically September 30th, 2020. The reason why that's important, Tom, is that is almost exactly 5 years ago, and that's the statute of limitations. So if they were to go beyond September 30th of this year, they could not file charges if, in fact, they believe that James Comey lied to Congress in the course of that testimony. It was about whether or not he authorized the leak, going back to the Clinton investigation, yet another high-profile investigation that he had. So that's something that they're considering. But given the fact that prosecutors are considering charges, we don't have full insight to what's before them.
Can we rewind for a second? What do we think the possible perjury or the lying to Congress is about?
Right. So there was an exchange that occurred between Cruz and
Senator Cruz,
Senator Ted Cruz and James Comey. And in the course of that, Comey is directly asked about whether or not he authorized a leak to a newspaper over something involving the Clinton investigation.
Okay.
Later on, there's testimony from his deputy director saying, because Comey said that he did not, from his former deputy director, Andrew McCabe, also fired, by the way, during the first Trump administration, saying that Comey did, in fact, authorize it. So there's a bit of a dispute there. Whether or not there are emails or notes or something that is further guiding federal prosecutors or not, that's something we don't have clarity into at this point. But there's definitely a difference in fact there, and that could be the basis for this topic.
And do we know, you mentioned the timeline, there's, I think, was it 5 days a week? I mean, when is the last day to see whether Comey gets indicted or not?
If it is going to be about and only about this particular instance that I just was talking about, it would be next Tuesday. But if they're looking at other matters, things that we're not even aware of yet, it could go beyond that. But if it's that, it has to be done by the end of business on Tuesday.
Okay. Tom Winchell first. Tom, always great to have you on the show. Thank you. Okay, we're going to turn now to the other big story we're following, this time from overseas. A powerful super typhoon carving a path of deadly destruction across Asia. The massive system now the most powerful tropical storm this year and blamed for at least 17 deaths. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer is in Beijing tonight with the latest.
The typhoon, called the King of Storms, hammered Hong Kong and southern China, with powerful winds and rain so heavy that seawater rushed through the doors of this Hong Kong hotel and swept through the lobby. At the harbor, rescuers pulled a family to safety, while on the coast, cameras captured storm surges inundating restaurants. This owner showing the damage done.
They completely gutted right throughout, the whole bottom floor. Pressure of the wave that came right over the wall.
In neighboring Macau, streets were underwater as Typhoon Ragasa churned across the South China Sea. The storm making landfall a second time here in China, slamming into Guangdong province, where authorities had evacuated nearly 2 million people to shelters. The strongest tropical storm on Earth this year, Ragasa has cut a path of devastation that started in the Philippines and passed south of Taiwan, where a barrier lake burst, triggering raging floods that killed at least 17 people. Experts say storms like this are only getting worse here due to warming seas and climate change, causing heavier rain that's lasting longer. Ragasa has been weakening as it moves now to Vietnam, but keeping the entire region on high alert. Janice Mackey-Frayer, NBC News, Beijing.
Okay, we want to get right to NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, we know you're keeping a close eye on two systems that could impact us back at home. Let's start, though, on Ragasa and the latest track.
Yeah, we were worried that this thing would be a little further to the south over warmer water and keep its strength. That didn't happen. And you notice you can see the spin, all the yellows and the reds blow, just evaporate practically. The storm is almost dead. It's going to provide some heavy rain tonight and tomorrow, maybe some more flash flooding. But the last 48 hours have been devastating, Tom, and that looks to be just about over.
All right, we were talking about this yesterday. We now have a new name for a tropical storm on our side of the globe in the Atlantic, Tropical Storm Umberto, and a second system right after it. Walk our viewers through what you're watching. And again, explain to us, could these possibly combine?
Yes, this is going to be a dance between two storms, likely two, maybe two hurricanes, maybe a tropical storm and a hurricane. So this is Umberto here. And then over Puerto Rico, it's what we call a tropical wave or tropical disturbance. Once it gets a little more organized, that'll be called a tropical depression. So flood threat in Puerto Rico as we go through this evening. And then we could see some areas getting up to 4 to 6 inches of rain. Then that will be slowly moving towards South Florida and the Bahamas as we go this weekend. At the same time, Umberto is going to be intensifying and will likely become our latest hurricane and maybe even a powerful hurricane. It looks to miss areas on the East Coast and take a path similar to Aaron, similar to what we just dealt with our Gabrielle. This storm will stay out to sea. But what happens with what will likely be Imelda. That's our I-named storm. So these are the tropical spaghetti lines for Umberto. Notice it misses the East Coast. Some are getting a little close to the Outer Banks, mostly just a big wave machine. But when we focus on Imelda, this storm will likely be over the Bahamas, probably as a tropical storm as we head through Saturday and Sunday, and then possibly even stronger than that. Now, the interaction of these two being so close to each other, they may influence each other. They may what we call Fujiwara effect, kind of dance around each other a little bit. If Umberto can sneak past, Imelda will just sit here and wait for it and then hopefully follow it out. But there's also the possibility that these two maybe absorb each other. Maybe Umberto is such a more powerful storm, it takes Imelda and kind of absorbs it. And that's what our American GFS model does. Either way, Tom, it does not look like to be a direct hit on the East Coast. But this is such a complex forecast. This is what we call a low confidence forecast. So stay tuned on the East Coast to see how this all plays out.
Low confidence forecast, high confidence with Bill Cairns. All right, Bill, we always appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Now to one of the major headlines coming out of the UN General Assembly happening in New York this week. In a meeting on Tuesday, President Trump promising Arab and Muslim leaders that he will not let Israel annex the West Bank. That, according to two sources who were in the room during talks with the leaders of 8 nations, something first reported by Politico. I want to bring in Matt Bradley, who joins us tonight from Tel Aviv. Matt, great to see you. President Trump has stood firm with Israel on not recognizing a Palestinian state. Why is annexing the West Bank a red line?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tom. And the fact is that annexing the West Bank would have so many more repercussions. When we're talking about, recognizing a Palestinian state, even some of the countries who said that they were recognizing them, a lot of their politicians acknowledged that that was mostly just symbolic. This, annexing the West Bank, would not be symbolic. And a lot of these Gulf countries have said that they, if Netanyahu goes ahead and annexes all of the West Bank, then that would jeopardize the Abraham Accords, their normalization agreements with Israel. That was the signature foreign policy achievement of President Trump during his first term, something that he's been trying to build on in his second term. He isn't going to want to see it affect his legacy like that.
All right, Matt, and then President Trump has been trying to negotiate a peace deal in Gaza for months. We have really no idea where that stands now with Israel moving into Gaza City as well. How could this latest move impact those negotiations?
Yeah, well, tucked into that Politico story, some of those 6 sources that you mentioned, they said that as far as the U.S. is concerned, it really does sound like these negotiations are not going to be working out. Now, where do we go from here, and how does this affect these negotiations? Well, the fact is that Qatar has already been the victim of an Israeli airstrike targeting those Hamas leaders, and it was a failed mission. That was, Qatar was the main intermediary. So they are no longer nearly as interested in this, and it looks as though Hamas is now on its last leg with this ground incursion that's expanding in Gaza City. It looks as though there's almost no one left to negotiate with. And that's one of the main problems ahead of negotiations and the wishes of the family members of those hostages still in the Gaza Strip who are desperate to see their loved ones returned home. Tom?
Matt Bradley for us tonight. Matt, we thank you for that. The other major conflict dominating conversations at the UN this week, the war in Ukraine, with President Trump seeming to reverse his stance on the situation, saying in part on Truth Social, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. For more on where things stand, I want to bring in Andriy Dobryansky. He's the communications director for the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America and has been at the UN General Assembly this week with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Andriy, thanks so much for being here. I got to ask you, if you could be honest here, how surprised were you by the post and the president's comments?
Not as surprised as if I hadn't talked to the foreign minister. He arrived on Sunday, and he said big things are happening this week. We obviously saw 60 leaders sign on to the Crimean platform today. A lot of things happening on the outside. But this is truly surprising. So I was warned that something big might happen. Here we have President Trump fundamentally changing his mind and seeing a win for him. He's been talking about this being Biden's war. He wants to end this war, not with a diplomacy. He wants a thorough end for what Putin's been doing.
Andriy, I was in Alaska there for the potential peace summit. I was in front of the White House anchoring this show when Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, was there speaking with European leaders and the president. This is a big shift. Do we know why the president shifted? Because this wasn't his original offer.
Because of the intelligence on the ground. Ukraine has been trying to get more weapons. There's been discussions about more sanctions. Ukraine at the same time said, hey, let's look at what sanctions are existing right now. And part of those sanctions are sanctions on Western manufactured parts for refineries in Russia. Those are the refineries they're targeting with those new long-range 2,000, 3,000-meter drones. If they can knock down Russia's oil production, which is what President Trump mentioned in his meeting with Zelensky, he sees the drop in oil. He also knows that he's ramping up LNG, and he's talking to European leaders, but he's also going to be supplying them with more. This is a win-win. If Ukraine keeps on knocking down Russia's oil production, the United States not only gets an end to the war, which they've been financing in a way, but they get to increase their export of fossil fuel to Europe.
How much faith do you have in the president that he won't reverse his stance again, President Trump?
I got to tell you that a lot of Europeans, including some of President Macron's people, were saying, well, you can't trust him. He goes one day the next. The Ukrainians in the room said to a person, what we read on Truth Social, those are the words he talked to President Zelensky about. So he's real about this in a certain way.
Okay, Andrea, I want to ask you about something else. Just yesterday, we reported on drone sightings, right? This was a big story in Europe. We had them here in New Jersey last year. They shut down 2 major airports in Europe, with some suggesting those drones were Russian. And countries across Europe have been on high alerts in recent weeks because of Russian aircraft entering their airspace, NATO countries. President Zelensky spoke about this in his address to the UN. I want to play a bit of that for our viewers.
Well, Ukraine is only the first, and now Russian drones are already flying across Europe, and Russian operations are already spreading across countries, and Putin wants to continue this war by expanding it, and no one can feel safe right now.
Is that real, or is that an exaggeration? Is Russia trying to expand this war?
They are also testing. But at the same time, here's one key point that Ukrainian negotiators want the West to understand. You remember what Russia's been doing over the last decade, especially when you go a little further back during the Olympics. Right before the Olympics, the entire world was saying, how can you possibly give Russia the Olympics? They've invaded Georgia. They've done all this stuff. And what they did right before then is they ramped up prosecution of LGBT rights in Russia. That ended up being the only concession they gave to have the Olympics go on after that without any international scandal. This is the similar tactic. We're going to ramp up all of these aerial incursions onto NATO territory right before they think they're going to sit down with President Trump and have a negotiation. In other words, they're raising the cards on the table.
Straw man almost, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we got to be careful about what Russia's doing. Yes, they're testing, but they're also increasing the cards they have to play on the table for negotiation.
Andre, so great to have you here for your analysis. We appreciate it. Come back anytime, okay? All right, we're going to be back in a moment with Jimmy Kimmel back on the air with blockbuster ratings despite being banned by local ABC stations. The late-night host growing emotional and offering a fierce defense of free speech. And the big rig chase coming to a dramatic end, what led police on this wild ride, and the 2 men now in custody. Plus, the surge in solo travelers. They used to be penalized with extra fees on everything from flights to cruise cabins. Why the industry is changing course and how much you can cash in. Stay with us. We're back now with Jimmy Kimmel's return to late-night TV. In his first night on the air in nearly a week, the comedian growing emotional, addressing the comments he made following Charlie Kirk's assassination and criticizing threats to freedom of speech. The show bringing in more than 3 times its typical viewership, despite dozens of affiliates refusing to air it. Here's Liz Kreutz.
Jimmy Kimmel finally breaking his silence.
The government threat to silence a comedian the president doesn't like is anti-American.
Tonight, ABC saying Kimmel's return is now his highest-rated episode in more than a decade. Kimmel addressed his suspension and conservative outrage to comments he made about Charlie Kirk's alleged shooter.
I do want to make something clear because it's important to me as a human, and that is, you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. And for those who think I did point a finger, I get why you're upset. If the situation was reversed, there's a good chance I'd have felt the same way.
In a searing defense of free speech, Kimmel went on to criticize the FCC chairman and President Trump.
The president of the United States made it very clear he wants to see me and the hundreds of people who work here fired from our jobs. Our leader celebrates Americans losing their livelihoods because he can't take a joke.
The president slamming Kimmel's return, saying the White House was told by ABC that his show was canceled, suggesting he may take legal action again against the network. Kimmel's show already racking up more than 26 million views across YouTube and social media, after ABC says Kimmel didn't air in 23% of TV households because of Nexstar and Sinclair's decision not to run the show.
All right, Liz Kreutz joins us tonight again from Los Angeles. So, Liz, have we heard anything more from the media groups refusing to air Kimmel's show?
Tom, well, Sinclair has still not said anything since Kimmel's show last night, so we haven't heard from them. We do know that they had their demands where they wanted to have a direct apology from Kimmel to the Kirk family and also have Kimmel donate to the Kirk family and Turning Point USA in order to bring Kimmel back. Nexstar has put a statement out. They are not bringing Kimmel back for now, but they did say that they are continuing their discussions with Disney to try to bring the show back. In terms of reaction, you know, he is being praised by many of his supporters, people calling those remarks heartfelt and unifying. But many conservatives are still criticizing those remarks, saying that they lacked an apology. The spokesperson for Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA, said not good enough. Tom?
Yeah, I do want to ask you, Liz, you were covering all these protests that were happening outside Disney Studios, El Capitan. Are those protests over? Are people done protesting Disney?
We haven't been down there today, Tom, but I can tell you that last night people were still out there protesting the FCC. I think that there has been a little bit of a shift. Jimmy Kimmel did a really good job turning this PR nightmare around for Disney. There was a letter that was released today by several former journalists from ABC News directly to the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, calling on him to come out and speak about the importance of a free press and free speech. So I think this isn't over yet. I think people do want to hear from Bob Iger. But at the moment, Kimmel's remarks seem to have settled some of the backlash that Disney was facing, Tom.
All right, Liz Croysford, Liz, we thank you. We're also following reaction to President Trump's announcement earlier this week telling women not to take Tylenol while pregnant, saying it may be linked to autism. Former President Obama now blasting President Trump for those remarks. Obama saying Trump's claims are undermining public health, accusing him of, quote, violence against the truth. It comes as Vice President Vance appeared to soften Trump's position, saying pregnant women should consult with their doctors about which medications to take. Leading experts say there is no conclusive evidence linking acetaminophen and autism. Okay. When Top Story returns, huge news for TikTok users. President Trump set to sign a deal as soon as tomorrow to keep the popular social media app operating in the U.S. Plus, they look like the real thing, the growing scam on social media preying on apartment hunters, with fraudsters posing as real agents, but they're ripping people off and leaving them empty-handed. What you need to know. But first, Top Story's top moment, when bride Kelly spotted singer Camila Cabello at her hotel in Idaho on the night of her rehearsal dinner. She was so excited to tell the Grammy nominee that she planned to use her song, First Man, for her father-daughter dance. The next day, guess what? Cabello was so touched that without hesitation, she offered to sing the song live herself. Take a look.
Kind of planned this, and it was kind of a little last-minute kind of thing that we put together, and I'm really honored to be a part of this moment for you, Kelly. You held me so tight, now someone else can, but you were the first man that really loved me.
That is so incredible. Kelly tells Top Story that she has always believed things happen for a reason, and it is a moment she will never forget. That is pretty cool and good for Camila as well. Stay with us. More news on the way. Welcome back. We are continuing our coverage of that deadly shooting at an ICE facility in Dallas as authorities search for answers. I had the chance to speak with acting ICE Director Todd Lyons moments ago on the latest developments in the investigation. Here's our conversation. My first question to you is, this hit home for you in a lot of ways, but you actually worked in the Dallas ICE office, right?
I did. I have so many good friends that still work there. It was really hard. I actually got the news as we were walking on set today on a totally different related subject at CNN. You know, to hear that the ICE office was under fire, those potential fatalities, you know, it really hit home. Seeing the photos today, some of the bullets were in an office that I used to have there. Yeah. It's a horrible feeling. People always ask me what's the thing that keeps me up at night. It's the safety of the men and women of ICE, and this is bad.
So take me to the beginning. What did you hear first? What did they tell you, and what did you think?
You know, originally we heard there was an active shooter on site, that there were, you know, potentially 3 people down. It wasn't as it started to unfold that we learned it was a sniper. Yeah. You know, the individual was just shooting indiscriminately, hitting windows, the lobby doors. Then the direction of fire was at our Sallyport, which is the location where detainees are brought in. The detainees weren't outside a vehicle. The shooter was just shooting at random vehicles inside. They were still hit inside the vehicle. You know, there were some brave men and women on the ground that went into those vans, were pulling those detainees out while they're under fire. Unfortunately, one died. Two are, critical condition right now at the hospital. But
and they were all shot while they were in the vehicle?
They were shot while they were in the vehicle, right. So the shooter obviously didn't know who was in the vehicle. He was just randomly shooting at windows, into vehicles that he'd already seen down there, at the officers that were outside the vehicles who had taken cover. What's really scary is the field office is right off I-35, 6:40 in the morning, Central Time, busy highway. There was a high-power rifle. Could have hit someone going to work, taking their kid to school. There's businesses around there. There's apartment complex around there. So this, was a targeted attack on ICE, but this really could have hurt anyone.
What do you know the condition of any ICE personnel? Were they hurt in any way, injured?
No, there was no ICE personnel and no civilians at the time that were at the facility that were injured at that time.
When you got the notification, maybe they texted you the photo, but the country has seen it now, anti-ICE written on one of those bullets. What did you think?
Obviously, I was devastated. It's the one thing we've talked about, the 1,000% increase on ICE officers and agents nationwide.
1,000%?
1,000%. And it's just increasing. It's getting more violent as it goes. We'd always talked about it's going to get worse. Secretary Noem put that out today, that all the vile talk against ICE, calling us Nazis, Gestapos, that something like this was going to happen, and it did. And, for me, it's my worst nightmare. And, it's bad enough the men and women of ICE have to go out there and put themselves in harm's way, doing their law enforcement mission, but never thinking that in our own facility, our own location, we take sniper fire in a major city. I
got to ask you about that. So we've seen this with the assassination attempt on President Trump, a sniper, two snipers, actually, in both cases. We saw it with Charlie Kirk. Unfortunately, that sniper was successful in his sick mind. And now we saw a sniper attack here, and a detainee is dead. How do you protect from that?
It's going to be hard. One thing, we're not going to be deterred from our mission, number one. But I got to make sure the men and women of ICE, to include our detainees, are safe. My heart goes out to that detainee's family. We're charged with their protection, their custody. Nothing like that should happen. It could have been some of the detainees' lawyers, who the lobby he fired into would have had people just visiting, the public, attorneys, could have been anyone. We need to definitely make sure all our security is in place. We need to make sure that we harden up our facilities, that we look for possible
does that happen now? I mean, do you have to start changing that up?
We've already been in a defensive posture, if you will. We want to make sure, just because of the attacks and some of the rhetoric, we were making sure we should be over precautious, making sure we're safe. But we need to go make sure we're definitely safe. When we go out and make arrests now, I never thought in my 20+ years in law enforcement would I have to send a security team out to protect people making an arrest.
What is your message to all the ICE agents out there, the men and women that are under you? What is your message to them as they sort of go into the job every day?
My message to them is I totally have their back. My number one mission is making sure they go home to their families every night. Secretary Noem is doing everything in her power to make sure we have all the capabilities we need, but we will make sure they are safe. We're proud of them, what they do, and we will keep doing our law enforcement mission.
Talk to me about recruitment. I've seen reports where there's a certain amount of job openings, but you guys are having a lot of applications. Does an incident like this deter that? You mentioned the 1,000% increase in attacks on agents.
That 1,000% has gone up over the summer. I actually think it's more than 1,000% now. But what we've seen is over 150,000 applicants that have applied for our new hiring initiatives for special agents and deportation officers and our attorneys.
What do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from a lot of people just want to do the law enforcement mission, people have a good career in a federal law enforcement agency, and that's what ICE is. And that's what a lot of this really dangerous rhetoric is being targeted at ICE, and it's taken away from the good work the men and women do every day.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to speak to the president, vice president, Secretary Noem, you mentioned?
Secretary Noem has been great. She was amazing. She talked to myself and deputy director right from the beginning. Throughout the whole incident, myself, my team, and her team were in close contact. I spoke with the leadership on the ground, the Dallas folks, my friends that are still down there. We're making sure we're taking care of the men and women down there. We're going to make sure that they're, not only safe, but their mental state is safe too as well. We got to take care of them. It's a dangerous mission. We got to make sure we take care of the people.
ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons, we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we turn on to Top Stories newsfeed. We start with a stabbing at a high school in Pittsburgh, leaving at least 3 students injured. Police say a male student attacked several others during a fight early this morning. 2 students were rushed to the hospital, both with injuries to the abdomen. At least one is in critical condition. The third was treated for minor injuries at the scene. The 16-year-old suspect was treated for a cut to his hand and was taken into custody. Okay, tonight, a big rig chase in Orange County coming to a dramatic end. Here it is. Police pursuing the tractor trailer over reports that it was stolen and could be tied to a kidnapping. Our Los Angeles affiliate reporting that a passenger called 911 saying the driver wasn't letting them out of the vehicle, but the call was disconnected. An armored vehicle cutting the big rig off. The driver and passenger were both taken into custody. Okay. And President Trump expected to sign that long-awaited TikTok deal tomorrow. Two senior White House officials telling NBC News the deal will facilitate the sale of the app from the Chinese-based company ByteDance to a group of U.S. investors, which could include Oracle's co-founder Larry Ellison, Dell Technologies CEO Michael Dell, and the Murdoch family. Once that deal is done, TikTok's U.S. operations would be run by a new joint venture company, and ByteDance will own less than 20% of that new company's stock. And calling all Brady Bunch fans, the iconic house from the 70s classic sitcom will open to the public for the very first time. The home, located in Studio City, L.A., will officially open its doors for 3 days in November. While the home's exterior was used in the show, the interior was renovated by HGTV and transformed into a replica of the set. Tickets include an hour-long tour, and all proceeds will go to a local pet charity. Pretty cool. Okay, now to an NBC News investigation into a growing scam on social media, preying on apartment renters looking for housing in a competitive market. Here's Chief Consumer Investigative Correspondent Vicki Nguyen.
Big bedroom with a balcony, which you're going to see in a second, which is really cool.
The ads look real and appealing, but experts say beware of apartment hunting on social media apps like Instagram and TikTok. Many of these videos we found are posted by scammers, impersonating real agents and manipulating real listings. New York real estate agent Mike Bussey runs Real NYC Apartments. So that's your video.
That's my video, 12 million views on that.
He showed us how fraudsters repost his videos on bogus accounts, claiming to have rents far below market rate, all with the intent of luring potential renters to send an application fee quickly before the deal disappears.
This is a 2-bed, 2.5 bath. So each bedroom has its own private ensuite bath. My mother had shown me the video and gone, Mike, this is such a good deal. I'll rent it myself. My mother's a very intelligent person, so she fell for this. Imagine how many other people have fallen for this. And also, she had assumed that I was trying to drum up more business by lying. So I can't imagine how many people have thought that of me as well.
The scammers say this goes for $1,700 a month. What's the reality?
The reality is it's $12,000 a month.
The problem getting worse. In just the first 5 months of this year, the FBI received more than 130 real estate complaints referencing social media sites, with people reporting about $600,000 lost to scammers, about the same number of complaints received in all of last year. 28-year-old Jenny Diaz thought she found her dream apartment in Manhattan for $1,100 a month.
Everything looked legit. They looked really nice, and it made me hopeful.
So she contacted the number in the listing and paid a $350 application fee that she was told was refundable. She received this confirmation, but was then asked for another $1,000. How did you feel when you realized it was a scam?
It really sucked. Especially because at that time, I was really trying to manage my finances, and with the possibility of possibly getting an apartment, it broke my heart.
NBC News reviewed dozens of incidents from around the country of online impersonators using photos and credentials of licensed real estate agents. Realtor Shane Boyle says he's been targeted by dozens of scammers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on and on. None of these accounts are actually yours?
They're not mine, no.
But that's your picture.
They're all my picture,
and your name.
Yeah, and my name, yeah. Honestly, I would put in my stomach looking at that. I mean, it's horrible.
Meanwhile, Boyle receives calls, texts, and emails from people thinking he's the one behind the account they're messaging, sometimes even attacking him online. Here's one calling you a scammer who stole their aunt's money on TikTok and blocked her. You need to rot for what you've done. Wow. I mean, like, these are people threatening you, insulting you for something that a scammer did in your name.
Yeah, I try to block that out, actually. That's kind of get me a bit emotional.
NBC News sent Meta and TikTok links to accounts that appeared to be scams, and both companies took those profiles down. TikTok tells NBC News it proactively removed 97% of content that violated its guidelines on impersonation in the first quarter of this year. Meta says it uses automated and manual systems to block accounts that abuse the company's standards, but that scammers are constantly changing their tactics. Bussey has reported more than 1,000 of his videos posted on fake accounts, a task so time-consuming he had to hire someone to help get them taken down. He and Boyle say it's a never-ending cycle.
How many of these accounts have popped up over the last couple of years?
Let's say I put down one today. If I report it to whatever social media channel, maybe 2 goes up the next day. So it's like it's such a whack-a-mole situation where I'm not sure. I've lost count.
All right, with that, Vicki joins us now in studio. So, Vicki, what kind of tips do you have for people to make sure they don't get scammed?
Yeah, Tom, it's so important for folks to research the market rent, never pay money for a unit sight unseen, and always look up the real estate agent's contact information independently of that social media ad so that you make sure when you are reaching out to someone who says they're Tom Llamas, they really are Tom.
Yeah, and Vicki, when you were researching and doing this story, this is obviously something that's happening here in New York. Is it happening in other parts of the country, too?
It is happening coast to coast, especially in hot rental markets. These scammers have figured out a way to get people to give over this money because they know that it's a hot rental market.
We're back now with a decision from Camp Mystic sparking backlash tonight. The girls' summer camp in Texas, where more than 24 little girls and their counselors died in floods, announcing plans to reopen next summer. The decision dividing the tight-knit community and leaving one mother whose daughter's remains have yet to be found outraged. NBC's Priya Sridhar has this story.
Tonight, less than 3 months after devastating floods in Texas claimed the lives of 27 young girls and their counselors at Camp Mystic, the owners informing the families of the victims and the community in an email shared with NBC News by a source close to them that they have plans to partially reopen the camp next summer with a memorial, quote, dedicated to your precious daughters. The move shocking many of those families who told the New York Times they weren't consulted about the memorial. The mother of 8-year-old Seal Stewart, who is still missing, telling the Times, the camp is still pressing ahead with reopening, even if it means inviting girls to swim in the same river that may potentially still hold my daughter's body. The parents of 7 of those girls, now known as Heavens 27, sat down with NBC's Jenna Bush Hager earlier this month.
And as I started looking into, the different facts and circumstances, it became very, very clear that this wasn't an accident.
The owners say they'll reopen the area of the camp that was not damaged by the floods while they work to evaluate how to rebuild along the Guadalupe River. Also emphasizing they'll comply with the requirements of the newly passed Heavens 27 Camp Safety Act, which bans building cabins in flood zones and requires camps to have detailed emergency planning and training for all staff. And in the last several hours, a spokesperson for one of the families of the victims of the catastrophic flooding on July 4th took to Instagram and said that the family was not aware of any plans to build a memorial at Camp Mystic. They also said that the family really wants all of the resources available to be devoted to looking for the body of Seal Stewart. Tom?
Our Priya Sridhar for us tonight. Okay, we thank Priya for that. Denmark issuing an apology to Indigenous girls and women in Greenland forced to take contraception for decades. The Prime Minister speaking on behalf of the government's role in which Danish health authorities forcibly gave contraception to thousands dating back to the 1960s. It comes after an independent investigation into the abuse was published. The Danish government says they plan to establish a fund to compensate all those victims. And for the first time ever, scientists in the UK say they've successfully treated Huntington's disease. The genetic neurological disorder causes brain cells to break down over time, impacting everything from movement to behavior. Some people die from the disease within a decade of diagnosis. There is no cure, but the new data from a gene therapy trial claims to slow the disease by 75% in patients. Researchers say this treatment could not just help people live longer, but also prevent symptoms entirely. Okay, and for solo travelers looking to see the world, you may be in luck. More and more companies are ditching extra fees that may have made traveling alone more expensive than traveling as a couple or in a group. NBC's Brian Chung takes a closer look at ways you can save when jet-setting solo.
If you've ever booked a trip for one, you know the struggle. Hotels charging more, cruises slapping on fees, tour groups treating you like the odd one out.
It used to feel a little alien. When people would call me brave, I'm like, I'm just like you. I just want to travel.
Caitlin Rosati says she's been to 90 countries by herself over the last 10 years and often felt penalized just for rolling solo.
The gondola ride in Venice, it's 90 euros. no matter what. And so if you're a party of 4 or you're a party of 1, the flat rate is 90 euros. So it's a steep price to pay for being alone.
It's the so-called single supplement, an extra fee charged to solo travelers because hotels, cruises, and tours are often priced for 2. So if you book alone, you pay more just to cover the empty spot. According to a new report in the Washington Post, the tide appears to be turning. Google search data shows the term solo travel gradually climbing over the last 15 years until the pandemic, and then again reaching a record high this past summer.
I think a lot of people decided during the pandemic they wanted to travel come heck or high water. And so you saw that surge of travel interest, and solo travel is among those trends that we've seen just skyrocket.
And now some travel companies are capitalizing on that growing sector of travelers. From safaris in Tanzania waiving fees to cruise lines like Norwegian adding hundreds of cabins dedicated to solo travelers.
Sometimes if the cruise is not selling well, they will waive the solo supplement fee, which can be as much as a regular sailing. So not everyone's doing this, but those deals are definitely out there, and you're seeing more of that happen.
Rosati, who runs the blog No Man Nomad, says there's never been a better time to visit a destination alone.
I stayed at a hotel in Champagne, France by myself, and when I sat down for dinner, they handed me a newspaper, which at first I was like, that's quirky. But it was like, I think it's a nice gesture. It's just showing that companies are starting to notice.
The surge in solo travelers driven largely by women. In a report earlier this year, luxury travel network Virtuoso saying 68% of its solo clients are female.
I'm responsible for my own happiness.
Even superstar Tracee Ellis Ross getting in on the trend, documenting her own journey on her Roku show, Solo Traveling with Tracee Ellis Ross.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about.
And that's not to say I don't love still traveling with friends, because I do. But there is something really glorious about like shamelessly putting yourself first, of not having to answer to anybody.
With more changes seemingly on the horizon, it just might be the perfect time to stop waiting for a travel buddy and book yourself that solo trip.
All right, with that, Brian Chung joins us now on set. So, Brian, do we know why people seem to be traveling more solo?
Yeah, well, I mean, the solo travelers that we spoke with as part of this story were kind of saying that there's also the social media aspect of it. So they're seeing on Instagram other people traveling. They're seeing those beautiful photos of themselves kind of by themselves in all of these photos and saying, hey, you know what? Maybe I should go do it myself. And because that solo travel infrastructure is there now, it's not costing them as much as it used to. It's getting a little bit more popular. And the other aspect of this, too, Tom, is the remote work. After the pandemic, a lot of people actually have the flexibility to work from entirely another country, where in some cases they're also choosing to do that alone.
Time zone catches up to you after a while, but yeah, you can definitely do it. All right, Brian, thanks so much for being here.
Yep.
When Top Story returns, she can barely see over the board, but at just 10 years old, this young phenom is already towering over the chess world. Meet the fifth grader rewriting the rules of the game, and what happened when our Raf Sanchez tried to take her on. That's next. We are back now with the latest in the world of artificial intelligence. Every day it seems we're hit with a new headline about AI and how it's making people more productive. But a new study from Harvard Business Review finds that might not always be the case, saying AI-generated work slop is destroying productivity. So what is work slop? Well, Harvard defined it as AI-generated work content that masquerades as good work but lacks the substance to meaningfully advance a task. To help us work through the work slop, I'm joined tonight by Lance Ulanoff. He's the editor-at-large of Tech Radar and a good friend to Top Story. Lance, so great to see you, as always. I want to show our viewers sort of a side-by-side human work versus AI work slop. So here's an example we're going to put of a pitch written by one of our producers about a story we did earlier this week. It's a few sentences about the new NASA astronauts, quick and to the point. Now here's an example of what ChatGPT came up with when given the same prompt. It's long, it's wordy, you can see it just keeps scrolling here, giving a lot of unnecessary details that weren't in the human pitch. A lot more work for the person receiving it, or reading it, we should say. So this is what people are faced with in the workplace. Talk to me about, like, what exactly this is. I mean, are you seeing this? Can you notice it already?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we're all starting to talk like AI. We're all using it so much, and it is bleeding into our work. And you see that, well, that's a useful report, except it lacks the context of the task. And this is the thing. This is the human element that's being sort of squeezed out in the workplace because so many people have these tools in front of them and are relying on them. And I know that the study said that like 40% of people have seen work slop in the workplace and 38% are confused. And that is because it's not quite right. And people forget that AI isn't always accurate. So then the work that you have is, one, let's make it so it makes sense. Let's make it so it's accurate. So if you hand that to a coworker or your manager, well, immediately they look at you and say, what, did you not understand the task?
Right.
And you're like, well, I relied on AI.
Is the length kind of one of the first telltale signs? Because it seems like the AI work slop is a lot longer.
Yeah, it's trying to be comprehensive.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't understand brevity. It doesn't understand. When you give an AI a prompt, right, you're telling it what you need. Sometimes you'll just put in a sentence. Well, it just answers that whole sentence.
Right.
The true power of AI is crafting prompts, multiple prompts, until you have a work product that is actually useful in the workplace. And that's something that a lot of people have to learn. You know, people have to learn things like AI everywhere is not always the answer. They also have to understand when to use AI, where and how. And finally, get back to collaborating with people again, because that is one way of getting around this.
You know, the interpersonal impact they found, Harvard says approximately half of the people we surveyed viewed colleagues who sent work slop as less creative, capable, and reliable than they did before receiving the output. 42% saw them as less trustworthy, and 37% saw that colleagues as less intelligent. So I guess AI could make your colleagues not trust you. It could be bad for business.
Absolutely. The last thing you want is to take something directly from ChatGPT and your manager goes, yep, good, pushes it out, right? A presentation.
Maybe a year ago before everyone knew about ChatGPT, now it's all out there.
Yeah, exactly. People are shoving, you know, we know that there's a lot of AI slop, not just work slop, all over the internet, including books, presentations, movies, pictures, audios. And so in the workplace, it is far more damaging because it can be everything from, you know, a report to coding. You have to have the human element, and you want to have that barrier before it gets out into the world. Otherwise, yes, your business could be harmed.
Lance, so great to have you here, man. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
All right, finally tonight, we want to introduce you to one of the world's best chess players, but you might be surprised to learn she doesn't have decades of experience under her belt. At just 10 years old, she's a prodigy of the game, using her skills to defeat not just chess veterans, but also our very own Raf Sanchez.
Okay. At just 10 years old, Badana Sivanandan is so small she needs a booster seat to see the board. But that hasn't stopped her from becoming a giant of global chess. The fifth grader from the UK regularly trounces adult champions decades her senior, and is now the youngest ever female international master, the game's second highest rank.
How does it feel when you play people who are so much older than you and you beat them?
I try kind of not to worry about factors like that. I just try and focus on the board and play the boards.
When Badana was just 5, her father brought home a second-hand chess set.
I was quite interested in the pieces and I wanted to use them as like toys to play with.
Within weeks, she was beating her dad, learning to master the game not from a coach, but from lessons on YouTube. And today, videos of her defeating veteran players regularly go viral.
She's just beaten me, and I'm an ex-British champion.
I'm not exactly a veteran, and my time at middle school chess club wasn't much help. As Badana beat me again and again and again. Experts say this may be the start of an all-time great chess career.
Do you ever feel like it's too much pressure?
No, because I just try and like enjoy chess as a game, and so just trying to like kind of play for the achievements or anything like that.
An ancient game where a kid can be a queen. Raf Sanchez, NBC News, London.
All right, that does it for us tonight. We thank you so much for watching Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way. All right, finally tonight, we want to introduce you to one of the world's best chess players, but you might be surprised to learn she doesn't have decades of experience under her belt. At just 10 years old, she's a prodigy of the game, using her skills to defeat not just chess veterans, but also our very own Raf Sanchez.
At just 10 years old, Badana Sivanandan is so small she needs a booster seat to see the board. But that hasn't stopped her from becoming a giant of global chess. The fifth grader from the UK regularly trounces adult champions decades her senior, and is now the youngest ever female international master, the game's second highest rank.
How does it feel when you play people who are so much older than you and you beat them?
I try kind of not to worry about factors like that. I just try and focus on the board and play the boards.
When Badana was just 5, her father brought home a second-hand chess set.
I was quite interested in the pieces and I wanted to use them as like toys to play with.
Within weeks, she was beating her dad, learning to master the game not from a coach, but from lessons on YouTube. And today, videos of her defeating veteran players regularly go viral.
She's just beaten me, and I'm an ex-British champion.
I'm not exactly a veteran, and my time at middle school chess club wasn't much help. As Badana beat me again and again and again. Experts say this may be the start of an all-time great chess career.
Do you ever feel like it's too much pressure?
No, because I just try and like enjoy chess as a game, and so just trying to like kind of play for the achievements or anything like that.
An ancient game where a kid can be a queen. Raf Sanchez, NBC News, London.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.